I never imagined that an invitation to a family getaway would shatter the fragile peace I'd fought so hard to build. At 27, I'd learned to live with the scars of my past, scars I never wished to see reopened. Yet here I was, summoned by my sister-in-law, Sophie, the dazzling yet dangerous storm of our family, who insisted I join an all-women escape to sunlit Spain. My husband, Aaron, also 27 and my rock for the past 3 years, 6 if you count our history, had warned me in hushed tones about her explosive nature. But promises of a blissful break and the gentle coaxing of Nadia, our bright and steadfast cousin, lulled me into reluctant acceptance. It began innocuously enough. Sophie's invitation arrived like an ornate key, unlocking a door to an exclusive holiday with her, our mother-in-law, and Nadia. Despite my reservations, Sophie and my mother-in-law had a way of clouding any joy with their theatrics. I found solace in Nadia's earnest longing for a break. Her warm eyes and hopeful smile persuaded me that perhaps I too could escape the relentless drumbeat of my memories, if only for a little while. Sophie, ever the enigma of privilege and cunning, had spared no expense. Her lavish sponsorship of our flights and hotel bookings came courtesy of her husband's success as a neurosurgeon and her own well-oiled event management enterprise. Though she held a degree in literature, she dismissed college as a mere detour, except, of course, for the serendipitous meeting with her current husband. Over time, Aaron had confided in me that Sophie had been indulged from childhood, her every whim granted with little regard for consequence. Even now, she wielded silent treatments and pouting like a sorceress manipulating our hearts, buoyed by the unyielding support of her pampered parents. I'd never been her favorite, her calculated charm and insufferable entitlement had always set me on edge. Yet, in the name of family unity, I tolerated her antics. That tolerance was about to be tested on a chilly morning 3 days before our departure. The airport, a drab expanse far from home, offered little comfort as I arrived well ahead of schedule. With nothing to distract me, I turned to my phone, only to discover that its familiar, reassuring buzz was absent. Its vibration mechanism had failed, leaving me in a stark silence that foreshadowed what was to come. As minutes melted into a heavy, uneasy quiet, a peculiar message blinked onto my screen. It wasn't just any message, it was a screenshot sent by Sophie, an image that spun my world into a vortex of dread. The screenshot contained a text conversation from an unknown number, accompanied by a haunting photo. The image depicted a dimly lit snapshot taken right outside my house, where, disturbingly, a hand gripped a pair of scissors with a deliberate, almost ritualistic pose. Below it, the text read simply, "Tell your darling brother's wife that I'm back." In that moment, time seemed to fracture. My heart pounded in a relentless staccato, and a chill unlike any winter breeze swept over me. The image was not a random terror, it was an echo from a past I had desperately tried to forget. Memories of my college days, when a relentless stalker transformed my life into a waking nightmare, surged forth with cruel clarity. I remembered how this phantom had once followed me relentlessly, snapping photos from the shadows, sending cryptic messages that dissolved any semblance of safety. Despite my training in jiu-jitsu, every encounter left me trembling with a terror that no physical defense could quell. I had been isolated in my dorm, a prisoner in my own mind, until the day a dear roommate forced me to face the unspeakable horror and report it to the police. That old terror, once confined to the corridors of my memory, was now a brutal, uninvited visitor. Panic took hold. I scrambled to call Sophie, demanding she come over immediately, and then reached for my phone again to dial Aaron. In a voice that trembled with urgency, I instructed him, still half asleep, to arm himself with something heavy, lock the bedroom door, and prepare for the worst. His groggy confusion melted into grim determination as he grasped the seriousness of my tone. I was soon hurtling through the city in a cab, the world outside blurring into a tapestry of anxious neon and dark alley shadows. Each moment in that ride was punctuated by a cacophony of thoughts. What if this was real? What if my past was clawing its way back into my life? And then, as if summoned by my escalating dread, police sirens filled the air near my house. Officers combed the area, their presence a cold reassurance yet unable to dispel the mounting terror within me. In the midst of this chaos, the police traced the mysterious number. Their grim faces offered a flicker of explanation. The call had come from Fu Wilson, a name as empty and manufactured as the threat itself. The realization crashed over me like a tidal wave. This was no genuine danger, but a meticulously orchestrated prank. And the puppeteer behind it? None other than Sophie. Piecing together the fragments of my scattered thoughts, I recalled how Sophie had recently reconnected with an old college acquaintance, someone who, in casual conversation, had recounted my ordeal with the stalker. The story, once a painful secret, had somehow been weaponized. Sophie, with her penchant for dramatic mischief, had twisted my darkest memory into a cruel joke, aiming to rouse fear and chaos just before our flight. Fury and betrayal coalesced into a single, burning determination. In the cab, as the city's lights streaked by in a surreal montage, I launched into a tirade on my phone. Sophie's voice, quivering with forced remorse and hidden laughter, barely registered against the thunder of my own indignation. I recounted, in vivid detail, how her stunt had ripped open the gaping wound of my past, a wound that had once rendered me helpless and isolated. My words, laced with raw emotion, accused her of exploiting my deepest vulnerabilities for her own twisted amusement. It wasn't just a prank, it was everything. I denounced her habitual manipulation, the way her insufferable entitlement had been nurtured by indulgent parents and an unyielding social circle. In a moment of unrestrained anger, I sent her a barrage of messages that cut deeper than any knife. I told her she was nothing more than a spoiled, callous force, a pig both inside and out. Every syllable was a stab, not just at her behavior but at her very essence, a desperate attempt to reclaim my dignity in the face of her cruelty. The fallout was as swift as it was inevitable. Aaron, Nadia, and a chorus of family members united in their condemnation of Sophie. In what felt like an overnight revolution, relatives from both sides, my father-in-law, mother-in-law, and even distant cousins, rallied behind me. Suddenly, Sophie's every whim, her every tantrum, was exposed for what it truly was, a reckless abuse of power that endangered not only my mental peace but the very fabric of our family bonds. As the police departed and the cab pulled away from the scene, a heavy silence settled over me. I sat there, numb yet seething, wondering how a single moment of cruelty could unravel years of tenuous familial ties. That day, my phone remained off for hours, its silence a grim reminder of the digital onslaught that had upended my world. The notifications I had once relied on for comfort were absent, each silent moment a haunting echo of my past terror. In the days that followed, the wounds festered. Sophie's prank, which she had intended as a harmless jest, was revealed to be a calculated attack on my sanity. The family, swayed by the evidence of her manipulation, began distancing themselves from her. Yet, amidst the collective outrage, I found myself wrestling with a bitter internal conflict. I had hurled words at Sophie, words that pierced not only her heart but her insecurities. I had branded her a pig, a remark aimed squarely at the deep-seated self-doubt she so desperately tried to hide. I spent restless nights questioning whether my retaliation had been too severe. In a moment of clarity amid the chaos, I reached out with a fragile apology, one that addressed only the hurtful jibe about her appearance. I made it clear that while I could regret the cruelty of that single cutting comment, the rest of my reaction was a mirror to the havoc she had wreaked on my life. I couldn't, and wouldn't, apologize for protecting myself from reliving a nightmare I'd once endured. Sophie's reply, when it came, was a tapestry of ambivalence. Her message dripped with passive remorse, as if she'd spent hours concocting a half-hearted mea culpa that could scarcely mask her underlying self-importance. She lamented that, given our long-standing friendship, I should have overlooked a mere tiny mistake. The words rang hollow, a feeble attempt to deflect responsibility that only deepened my resolve. In the wake of these exchanges, our family found itself irrevocably divided. Nadia, who had been so eager for the promise of escape, ultimately canceled her participation in the trip. The realization was bitter. No one wanted to be around someone who could turn a simple vacation into a veritable battlefield of emotions. My mother-in-law and even my father-in-law sided with the majority, their messages echoing the same refrain: Sophie's behavior was unforgivable, and the cost of her mischief had been too dear. A week later, I shared my ordeal on an online forum, a desperate plea for impartial judgment in a maelstrom of conflicting loyalties. The responses varied wildly. Some champions of justice praised my steadfastness, arguing that my reaction was not only justified but necessary. Others cautioned that I had stooped to the same level as Sophie by lashing out at her insecurities. Aaron's steady voice of reason backed my actions unequivocally, while Nadia's empathetic yet conflicted tone left me reeling in doubt. I was torn between the need for self-defense and the nagging guilt that perhaps I had allowed my own past trauma to dictate a response that was too extreme. The memory of that relentless stalker, a shadow that had once haunted every step I took, reminded me that every trigger, every cruel echo from my past, demanded a fierce reaction. But even as I justified my words in the quiet recesses of my mind, I wondered if the cycle of pain would only continue if I allowed this battle to escalate further. In a final bid to reclaim my narrative, I sent one more message to Sophie, a parting shot wrapped in resignation. I reasserted that while I had offered a tentative apology for the personal insult, it did nothing to absolve the deep betrayal I had suffered. I reminded her that her careless manipulation had thrown our family into chaos and dredged up memories I'd fought so hard to bury. I told her that genuine remorse was the only path to healing, not hollow words delivered in a moment of fleeting panic. I set my phone aside, its screen now a silent witness to the emotional tempest that had rocked our lives. In the stillness of that moment, I allowed myself a deep, shuddering breath. The cacophony of messages and the remnants of past fears swirled together in a chaotic dance, yet a fragile determination began to take root. I vowed that I would no longer let the ghosts of my past, embodied in every cruel prank and every callous message, dictate my future. Update 1. A few days later, as I scrolled through a deluge of responses online, I realized that my confession had struck a nerve with many. People debated the morality of my actions, some empathizing with my lifelong battle against fear, others chastising me for my harsh words. The consensus, however, was unyielding. Sophie's prank was not just a simple joke, it was a deliberate exploitation of my vulnerability. Though I had apologized for the biting comment about her appearance, a remark that, in hindsight, I wished I could unsay, I made it abundantly clear that the rest of my tirade was born of genuine anguish. The flood of messages, laden with both support and criticism, left me conflicted but resolute in my decision to stand by my truth. Update 2. Several hours later, an unexpected message arrived from Sophie. Her tone was measured, almost clinical, as she admitted that perhaps she had miscalculated the impact of her actions. She said she considered me a true friend for having overlooked a small misstep, as though our bond had once been so unbreakable that a mere prank could be forgiven without consequence. Yet her words were as cold as they were apologetic, a passive apology that left no room for genuine remorse. I couldn't help but reflect on how our relationship had deteriorated long before this incident. Our friendship, if it ever truly existed, had been a fragile facade. Her apology did little to bridge the chasm between us. Instead, it confirmed that we were irreparably divided. I accepted her message with a heavy heart, knowing that any further reconciliation was as unlikely as the fading echoes of a nightmare. Update 3. A month slipped by, carrying with it both sorrow and unexpected hope. Nadia, whose support had been a beacon during the darkest hours, revealed that she was pregnant. The news, a burst of joyous color against the gray backdrop of our recent turmoil, was celebrated at a lavish family party, a celebration from which Sophie was conspicuously absent. The gathering was filled with laughter, bittersweet to those who remembered the chaos she had sown. Yet, even in her absence, Sophie's shadow lingered. At the party, amidst clinks of glasses and soft murmurs of congratulations, Nadia received a text message from her. In it, Sophie expressed contrived well wishes for Nadia's journey into motherhood, couched in a tone that was equal parts sanctimonious and passive-aggressive. She claimed that prior commitments had barred her from joining the celebration, a feeble excuse that did nothing to mask her longing to be part of the family's joy. We all shared a silent, knowing smile, a private acknowledgement that her presence, however feigned, had become an unwelcome reminder of a painful past. Now, as I piece together the shattered fragments of these events, I stand at a crossroads. The turmoil wrought by Sophie's callous actions has left its mark, not only on me but on our family's delicate tapestry. The echoes of that fateful morning in the airport continue to reverberate through my days, a stark reminder of the cost of indifference and the peril of past traumas. And yet, in the midst of this chaos, a fragile hope has begun to emerge, a hope that we might someday rebuild our bonds free of manipulation and cruelty. I know now that I must guard my heart against those who would exploit my pain. I must cherish the support of Aaron and Nadia, whose unwavering love has been my anchor through this storm. And while the scars of my past will forever serve as a reminder of the battles I fought, I also know that I have the strength to rise above them. I choose to believe that tomorrow will shine brighter than the shadows of yesterday. In the end, I have decided to let go of any lingering ties to Sophie. Her chapter in our family story is closed, a bitter lesson in the price of unchecked privilege and callous mischief. As I move forward, I carry with me not just the pain of that day, but also the hard-won wisdom that true healing comes only when we no longer allow our past to dictate our future. The journey ahead remains uncertain, and my heart, though scarred, beats with a newfound resolve. I will continue to seek solace in the warmth of those who truly care, and I will no longer allow the ghosts of a traumatic past to steal my peace. Even as I look back on those harrowing moments with a shudder, I now see them as the impetus for a new beginning, a life defined not by fear or cruelty, but by the strength to reclaim my own story. And so, as the echoes of that fateful day finally fade into the background of my memory, I step forward into a future where my voice rings clear and my spirit remains unbroken. The darkness may have once threatened to swallow me whole, but now I stand resilient, a survivor determined to forge a path of healing and hope.